What's up, RotoViz?
What's up, everybody? It's Curtis and Dave. This is the RotoViz Fantasy Football Podcast live stream / podcast. We're Score Scout tonight. The 2022 running back class. We did this with the wide receivers earlier this week. Really fun exercise. Kind of get those sims, the type of players that these prospects might become in the NFL, both in style and in production. Of course, that's what gets us on the fantasy profiles. We're going to talk Breece Hall, Isaiah Spiller, Kenneth Walker, 3, Kyren Williams, plus my top running back sleeper in the 2022 class. 4 tier 1 running backs. I've got 4 roses bourbon. Dave, hit us with a stat attack and let's get into this thing.
Yeah, all right. Let's just go right away to it. We talked about breakaway rush score last week. I teased some of the performances. We didn't really get too in depth, but Breece Hall, who we are definitely going to be talking tonight about, a player that a lot of people feel pretty good about, in albeit not the strongest running back class we've ever seen, actually comes in second in the 2022 running back class with a breakaway rush score of 104. Hold on, dude. That seems odd. Hold on. I'm gonna. Oh wait, we're live. I forgot about that. So we can't cut stuff anymore. We are live. All right. Hold on.
Need a double check?
Well, yeah, I'm quickly pulling it up. I'm sure that's right, but okay.
I think it's probably
104.
Right. You're probably right, Dave.
Okay, it's 101. 101. All right, so off by 3 there.
Kennedy Brooks. Must be Kennedy Brooks, eh?
Yes, Kennedy Brooks. So I'm sorry. I know that was a completely unnecessary pause right there to look that up. But yes, it was 101. I knew something seemed fishy. But 101, that's a strong score, especially for this class. If you look at some of the historical numbers that you see, 100 puts him up with players like a Michael Carter and Aaron Jones, Dalvin Cook, in that range. So definitely nothing to scoff at. And that is all available in the guide, which, as a reminder, if you check out and you get that guide, you get a 15% discount on a RotoViz subscription is included in the guide. So just another reason to go check that out. And also got to recommend that you go over to the FFPC and check out everything that they have going on there. And that is our FFPC stat attack. All right, Curtis, what do you say we start box score scouting here?
Let's get into it, man. We got Breece Hall. What do you got for me on Breece Hall?
All right, Breece Hall, 73 inches tall, 220 pounds, big guy, will be 20. We'll have a draft age of 20, May 31, 2001 is the birth date, which is crazy to start thinking, Curtis, about players from guys born in 2001 as being 20, aging ourselves there. But yeah, final college season at age 20. In the guide, we have him ranked just behind one wide receiver in Burks, who we talked about last week. Clearly looks like the number one player at the running back position. Played 3 years at Iowa State, was involved in all of them. Actually saw 186 yards in his 186 attempts in his first season at Iowa State as a freshman. Put up 897 yards that year with 9 rushing touchdowns. In his sophomore season, 1,573 rushing yards, 21 rushing touchdowns, had a rushing attempt adjusted market share of 77, a running back dominator of 84, put up similar market share numbers In his final year at Iowa State, played 12 games, 1,462 rushing yards, and 20 receptions. So that's 50 touchdowns on his career, 3,932 rushing yards, and a running back dominator of 0.81 over the course of his college career.
Yeah, this is definitely the kind of the intersect of early production and sustained production in the class. Breece Hall kind of picking up where David Montgomery left off in that Iowa State program. Just look at this guy. Look at the drip on this player, man. He looks great in that kid. I hope he in a cool NFL city, because you got to love Team Visor when it comes to running backs. And I think you highlighted a lot of really important points there, Dave. You know, we know that we like the bigger backs. We like some backs that can catch the ball a bit. He's really well rounded in terms of what he provides from a production standpoint, and then also just from a skill set standpoint. Now, I should clarify before we even talk about where we've got him ranked in the rookie guide. He sims to from a production profile standpoint. Let's talk about just where Breece Hall. He is our RB1, to clarify, where he would compare to like last year's class. I would actually have put him like RB4 behind Javonte Williams. So, behind Najee, behind Javonte, you've got to keep that in mind, because we always want the 101. It's great to have the 101. Breece Hall is definitely worthy of 101 consideration in 1 QB leagues for sure. And, to some maybe league settings, even in a super flex capacity, because it's a weaker class. But to also keep in mind the relative value of the players year to year to year, because you're going to have those opportunities to trade picks this year for players that are already in the league, or picks this year for picks next year. Kind of just keep that in mind. But with that, we'll kind of go to where our team has him. In our 1 QB rankings, he's our 2nd overall player. We talked about Treylon Burks earlier this week. So Breece slots in behind him in our composite rankings here at RotoViz. And then, in Superflex, he also is still number 2 player overall. We actually did not change our 1 and 2 there. That at least at point in the process. Now, Dave gave us some of the measurements on Breece. So we've got a 220-pound back. Before the combine, with most of these higher end backs, I like to assume, hey, around the 4.5 and the 40. That's what I typically use as a control. They're going to be plus or minus, 5/100ths of a second, most of these backs. I certainly expect, Breece probably be maybe even a little higher than 4 or 5. And then, you get the draft pick projection. So, earlier this week, we're using the NFL mock draft database. Just if you didn't see the show earlier this week, it's a site that kind of compiles all of the mock drafts around the industry and then trends them and gives you, basically an ADP, a mock draft ADP. But it's based off of NFL drafts, not fantasy drafts. So they've got Breece Hall at 4 all. So now we've got all the information we need to come up with Sims and the RotoViz Prospect Box Score Scout. And I want to take a look at that now, because there's some really interesting names here, Dave, that I think will get people interested, even though I'm saying, I don't like him as much as some of the backs from the 2021 class. So let's get into this here. Zoom in a little bit for the audience. The opposite direction that we want to go. Here we go. Scroll over here a little bit. We've got Dalvin Cook as the number 1. Dalvin Cook as the number 1 sim is Prospect Box Score Scout, followed by Duke Johnson. I'm zooming out, so zooming in. Sorry about that, guys. Followed by Duke Johnson, Cam Akers. So the top 3 for Breece Hall: Dalvin Cook, Duke Johnson, Cam Akers. Get a bit of noise here with Bishop, Sankey, Thomas. But we also get Shady, LaShawn McCoy, Marlon Mack, J.K. Dobbins, Le'Veon Bell, Noshawn Moreno. So this is actually a really nice group. Even the guys lower end this, except for the total flops and Sankey and Thomas, there's a lot of production up and down. Probably the lowest end producers here are Duke Johnson, Marlon Mack, and Noshawn, but even all three of them challenged for low end RB1 at least one time in their career. Noshawn even had that one standout year with Peyton. And then the rest of the list is pretty darn exciting. I mean, Dalvin, multi-time top 5 running back. Everyone's excited about him. It looks like he's over from the Achilles. Shady, borderline Hall of Fame player. Le'Veon Bell, probably not Hall of Fame level, but Hall of Fame level talent. Had his career played out differently. So, upon first glance, what are you thinking about this list here?
This list is dynamite. This, I think, is one of the stronger lists that I ever remember looking at for running back. Now, I am not sure, like you said, that he's as talented necessarily or as strong of a prospect as some of these guys that we've seen in recent years. But when you look at a group of Sims like that, it's hard not to get excited.
Yeah, and so I think when you see this, what you're just looking for is who does the prospect most resemble? Is it most and I think really interesting because he's projected to have second round NFL draft capital too. You're not necessarily getting the elite of the elite pulled in here, but we're getting a lot of guys who didn't really get drafted in the first round, but on to have great careers. So I think that is some signal there when the eight out of the 10 closest Sims are very positive for Breece Hall. So I think it's fully justifiable to consider him with the 101. If you're playing like many of our listeners do in the FFPC, high stakes league with shallower benches and a traditional dynasty format over there where they only force you to start 2 wide. I think Breece and that type of setup is very worthy of the 101. Now, if you get into our RotoViz Triflex dynasty leagues or, other leagues where you can flex up even to like 5-6 wide receivers, I still think you got to go with the big man Treylon there. But it's probably a coin flip for most in the industry that I've seen so far. And it's totally justified when you see a list like this.
Yeah, for sure.
Right,
I mean, I think, oh yeah. All right. I was going to comment on that, but you know what? Why don't we just move along to a player here that I actually got pretty excited about? Well, I did some more digging into him while working on the guide, and that is Isaiah Spiller out of Texas A&M, 73 inches tall, 225 pounds. Another big running back. Will have a draft age of 20, played his final college season at age 20. As a 18-year-old freshman, 174 rushing attempts, 946 yards, and 10 touchdowns, an RB dominator of 0.51. As a junior in 10 games, did crack the 1,000-yard mark on 186 attempts, also added 9 rushing touchdowns. Then in his final year at Texas A&M, 12 games, 179 yards, 179 rushing attempts, 1,012 rushing yards, 6 rushing touchdowns, running back dominator of 0.44. So it's going to be interesting, Curtis, to see who the comps are here, given that we actually saw a little bit of the slowing of his pace on some of these stats, in particular touchdowns across his career, and then also the lowest running back dominator of his career coming in his junior season. So I'm interested to see where those come out. In terms of where we have Spiller, we do like him as the second best running back in the league. There are in the draft, but we do have a handful of wide receivers ahead of him.
Yeah, let's get a look at the guy here. This is a pretty cool picture from their, the matchup with Lamar. But you've got Spiller just kind of running away from everybody. When we were doing our rankings in our mock drafts for volume 1 of the guide, this was a player that I felt like Sean was just getting hotter and hotter on him as we did each mock draft. And I think it's a function behind Breece. I think it's fair to look at the other 3 guys kind of turning the top tier of running backs into a 4-man group. Just a hard after Breece Hall. But there's always that dynamic in dynasty rookie drafts where everyone after that initial, exciting player gets pushed up at the running back position. Everyone desperately needs that hit, desperately looking for a 300-point player. And it's just so hard for people to be patient or see that at the wide receiver position, especially when you can buy, veteran wide receiver production at the, kind of low end wide receiver 2, high end wide receiver 3 so cheaply in Dynasty typically. So I do expect that will happen. I don't know if it's going to be, from an industry perspective, if it's going to end up being Spiller or one of the other two guys got up there in this tier. But I did want to note that I even saw that happening within our group, which, we try not to push running backs up, but when you start looking at what happened in a draft, even on a team like ours that favors wide receiver, it just happens. Okay, so let's talk about where we've got him ranked in the rookie guide. So Spiller in our 1 QB rankings comes in at 7 overall. Again, you mentioned the RB2, and Superflex gets pushed down by a couple of those quarterbacks, and he is overall player number 9. You put in all the sauce. All right, so let's go over to our FL mock draft database. They have just one spot behind Breece Hall is where they've got Isaiah Spiller. So, that makes for a pretty comparable box score, cohort. But we see a lot of different players show up here. You get the overlap with Cam Akers from the Sims with Breece Hall. But then we get some new names. We get Shane Vereen, David Montgomery, Mark Ingram, Hall, Le'Veon Bell, Michael LaShore, Darius Geis, TJ Yeldon, and Kerryon Johnson. So definitely a different swath of prospects here, but there's still a lot of positive in terms of just fantasy relevance. With some RB2 seasons, David Montgomery with the top 5, I think RB3 overall season, if you look at the overall season long scoring rather than points per game. Recently, Ingram, multiple RB1 seasons and plenty of RB. Hall was a flash in the pan. We already talked about Bell. You have some noise here with Darius Geis. He was certainly a great prospect, just didn't pan out. Then, LaSure and Yeldon, kind of the lower end here, and Johnson also not necessarily cut with these other guys. So again, actually a pretty solid group, considering that we would have Spiller ranked below a lot of the backs from the 2021 class, Dave.
Yeah, and though it doesn't compare to the Hall group, it is impressive when you see a list of, I think every name on there actually had some relevancy on an NFL roster and had a season where they were contributing. So that's actually a pretty good list, which I think should be seen as encouraging. Now, part of the reason why those names aren't as impressive is the overall body of work throughout the career didn't hold up like Hall's did. Some of that was that decline. And then naturally, you're going to have a strong group of players like that given the projected draft position. But I think it speaks to some of the things that we could see from Spiller. So, if we do see him go drafted in that spot, we do see him test well at the combine, then I think that, there is going to be this interesting conversation about how high up he really can creep. So that's one of the things I'll be paying attention to.
Yeah, I think those are good notes. Let's move on to our RB3. We're going to have.
Yeah, so Kenneth Walker is our RB3 coming out of Michigan State by way of Wake Forest. Actually played his first 2 years at Wake Forest. 70 inches tall, 212 pounds. Oh, sorry, did you say something?
No, I was just enjoying your. I was just enjoying your description there.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, it was slight for everybody at home, slightly spotty connection tonight. So, wasn't sure if we were having some interference there, but draft age will be 21, played his final college season at age 21. As a freshman, 98 rushing attempts, 579 yards, 4 rushing touchdowns, an RB dominator of 0.35. Interestingly enough, puts up 579 yards again as a sophomore. That was on 119 attempts. Only played 7 games, though. But in those 7 games, 13 rushing touchdowns, developed that nose for the end zone, an RB dominator of 0.59. Then in his junior season, played 12 games, 263 attempts, 1,635 yards, which was 6.2 yards per carry, highest of his career. Also put up 8 18 touchdowns, had an RB dominator of 0.56. So that's only 35 touchdowns on his career, but an impressive number when you look at what he was able to do with those 7 games in 2020, then 18 in 2021. So if we turn our attention to the Sims, Curtis, what do we have?
Well, the first thing we need to do is solve for the projected draft. He's projected as a very late second round pick right now. When you look at the industry mock, 63rd position overall. So we put that in, with everything that Dave's already told us there, and a group that's slightly less impressive than what we've seen with our top 2 running backs that we talked about so far tonight. So we've got Walker's closest sim here being Michael LaShore. Jamal Charles is a hell of a sim for any to pop up. And Charles was a 3rd round pick himself. So that second, 3rd round borderline there, I think is, it's great to pull in this name, obviously. Sean Green, a bit of a bust. Daryl Henderson, he's given us, in spots what we wanted. But he just hasn't sustained it over the course of a full season for myriad reasons. Darrenson Evans has been a total flop. Trey Mason had one relevant. Carter, basically I'd forgotten about him until I saw him on this list. Amir Abdullah, one preseason play is basically his career. Bernard Pierce was a spot flex starter. Bernard Pierce was a spot for a time. And Lamar Miller, Lamar Miller's an interesting name here. I actually think that would be a pretty solid outcome for a player like Walker. A couple seasons of fantasy relevance, probably never, during the top 4 or 5 rounds of dynasty startups, but certainly a player that, you don't mind having as your RB2, RB3 on a team that's strong at other positions.
Yeah, so I look at this list and I see a lot of names that feel like guys that were always kind of close, always you were holding out some hope for them, but it just never really hit. And when you look at the type, this makes sense. This feels right because when you look at the profile of Walker, right, there's some things to get excited about, but you don't have it all quite coming together in a way that's going to support you to have the ability to make a case where you can get really excited about drafting him onto your team. So I think it will be interesting to see how things settle out in the industry, how far away he gets removed from Spiller and Hall, assuming that everybody ends up with them in a tier of their own. That's one of the things I'm going to be looking to. But, the other thing here is, Curtis, right? There are other backs that we could talk about too that I think possibly fill in to that area with Walker. Now, I think I do like him a little bit better than the player we're going to talk about next, who is Kyren Williams. But it's important to recognize that in this year, there are going to be other options. We might be a little bit confused at the time about who the correct ones are to target, but I think that finding those guys this year is going to be really important as there's not just as many standouts as we've seen prior.
Yeah, that's totally true. I think it's fair to draw a line after. It would be fair if you wanted to draw a line between Hall and Spiller. It would be fair if you wanted to draw a line between Spiller and Walker. It would also be totally fair if you wanted to wait until after Kyren Williams to draw that line. So Dave, kind of give us the stats. We can talk about the concerns and also the things that really pop with Williams.
Sure. So Williams, a smaller back than the ones we've talked about, 69 inches, 189 pounds. We'll have to see what he actually weighs in on. We'll have a draft age of 21. Final college season was played at 21. Very limited usage as a freshman at Notre Dame. In 2020 as a sophomore, played 12 games, had 211 rushing attempts, rushed for 1,125 yards, put up 13 touchdowns, and an RB dominator of 0.73. In 2021, as a 21-year-old junior, 12 games, 204 rushing attempts, 998 yards, 14 rushing touchdowns, RB dominator of 0.62. So you're looking at a player that had some production, not a prolific body of work by any stretch of the imagination, but did have good market share numbers. So I'm interested to see how he performed in the Sims.
Yeah, maybe not a body of work per se, but body looks solid. If you look there, I mean, this is a confident dude, even though he's smaller. Just, we think he's going to tip in right around 200. I'm sure that the training team will try to beefing up toward 205 as much as possible. But his playing weight this year was reported as 198. So you got to keep that in mind. This is definitely a different back, sub 210 for these other guys. Now he does give up some height. So, maybe the BMI ends up similar. We didn't pull that for this episode, but that's also, a relevant measurable there. So let's talk about where these mock drafts have Kyren Williams going. This is going to be the first player that drops below the second round for us. It looks like he's coming in at 72nd overall. The highest being mock drafted is 45th over the last couple of weeks. So, I think there's a little bit of division here. Definitely a wider bracket around the range of outcomes for Kyren, but like be in early to mid third when you kind of average it all together. Let's take a look at what that means for his RotoViz Box Score Scout Sims. Totally different list. This is a that would lead you to believe that we should not be drafting, this back in the first, unless there are some league specific settings. And I think our team has him ranked accordingly, Dave. So in volume 1 of our RotoViz Fantasy Football Draft Guide, in one QB, we have him in at 13 overall as our RB4. So there's plenty of wide receivers sneaking in there. Just Walker kind of peppered in the middle before you get down to Kyren. Now, I will say Travis May, our lead Devy analyst, he loves Kyren Williams. He's high. The only reason that he's at 13 is actually because Travis, the rest of the team is a little lower. Travis watches more college football than the rest of us combined. So I should say that. He is bringing a film analysis to it. Obviously, he's still a data and I guess I would say a research-based analyst, just like the rest of us. But he just watches more, and you can't ignore what you see. And he watches a lot of Notre Dame football there as well. So he's bringing that to the table. When you get to Superflex, he really gets pushed down, man. The Superflex tight end premium rankings, he falls behind our top 2 tight ends in those settings, as a handful of quarterbacks. So this is a different player, really affected by the other positions and league-specific settings. So kind of keep that in mind as you look at your draft picks in your hand, where you're going to target Williams. We probably won't end up with much, Dave, because I think most rookie drafts, your RB4 is going to go before this area.
Yeah. So, one of the interesting things too with Williams, I think, is what teams actually might want to do with him. So one question that you might have is, what did his receiving chops look like when he was in school? Had 35 receptions in 2020, 42 as a junior, 4 receiving touchdowns in total, 675 yards on his career. So we'll have to see how teams could use him in that capacity. I will say too, now I don't get to watch as much as Travis does, but from going back and looking at some film myself, is a really fun player. So I can see how people might start to get excited about him as we have more of a chance to start to digest these backs.
All right, Dave. So that's our top 4. So just to round that out, you got Breece Hall, you got Isaiah Spiller, you get Kenneth Walker 3, and you get Kyren Williams. That's the top 4. I want to add in my top sleeper. This is a player I'm really excited about. I want you to tell us who it is, Dave.
So that is Tyler Algiere. Is the I watched some clips so that I could get the pronunciation correctly. Wasn't sure if it was Allgeier. It is Algiere. I can confirm that. A player out of BYU, did play a full 4 years in college, stands 7'1", another larger back at 220 pounds. Could be hurt. And
that's 70. That's 71 inches. It's That would be.
Oh, did I say
that would be
7-1?
Another level. Oh yeah, yeah. That'd be another
It's been
level
a long
altogether.
week, man. It's been a long week. It's been a long week. All right. 71 inches, 220 pounds. Will be 22 though. Actually, have a draft age of 22. Limited involvement in his first 2 years at BYU. Played 11 games in his junior year. 150 rushing attempts. Averaged 7.5 yards per carry though, putting him at 1,131 yards on the year. 13 rushing touchdowns, but an RB dominator, but of just 0.39. Big swing though, man. In 2021 as a senior, 276 rushing attempts, 1,606 rushing yards, but 23 touchdowns, also an RB dominator of 0.62. So keep in mind, Curtis mentioned him as a sleeper. So if we see a list of players here for the Sims that are a little bit different, that is to be expected.
Yeah, so I want to add some context too. Dave mentions that he didn't really pop as running back until year 3. The reasons for that are that he was actually playing linebacker. He was a super prolific running back in high school, gets an offer, a two-way player in high school, and gets an offer at BYU, starts out on the defensive side of the ball. And so that's what makes him a really interesting prospect for me, because this is the type of player that when you're spending a little bit of a later rookie draft pick, you're just looking for a guy that can contribute in any way, because every time you're on the field is a chance to shine. This is a special teams player for sure on day one. And, because of that experience on the other side of the ball, I think that gives him some intelligence in terms of knowing where to attack the defense. It also gives him toughness. And it shows up. If you like watching highlights, watch Tyler Algiere's highlights. Probably one of my favorite of any player in this class is after a fumble, Algiere chasing down the opposing defender and then forcing another fumble and getting the ball back for BYU. This is the type of player we're talking about. When I watch him, man, and you can almost see it, just the body type, looking at him right here, I just think of James Conner. I think now, not James Conner in the sense that, we get frustrated about his ability to stay healthy, but like good James Conner when he was on the field, his first year or two in Pittsburgh, where kind of just doing everything. He got that chance when Lev Bell wasn't playing, and he just kind of never gave the job back. That's what I think Tyler Algiere is. He's a player that I would, if I was a starting running back on an NFL team, kind of loathe hearing this called on NFL draft day, because I just know that this guy's going to eventually eat into my workload. So let's see what the NFL mock draft database has to say about it. Another player where there's a little bit of disagreement. Some are mocking him actually as a day 2 back, Dave, 71st overall, the highest that we see him go. But many of the other, and the more common thing to see is a day 3 pick. I think he's going to test impressively. He'll be a step slower than the other guys we've talked about so far, but he's strong as an ox, and he's going to win the underwear Olympics. He's back talked about into the NFL Combine. So, what does that give us in the RotoViz Box Score Scout here? Let's scroll over and take a look. So Tyler Algiere in our 1QB rankings in the guide, overall rank of 19. I've got him as high as 14. And we've got a couple guys. I think Blair actually might be a little bit lower than the rest of us, but he comes in as a mid-late second round pick. I think that's fair. Right now, we've got him at RB5. In Superflex, he just gets the same adjustment that we saw actually for Kyren, just dropping 2 spots there. The central list that we see here, Kenneth Dixon, man, he was like such a favorite of so many to eventually pop out, but unfortunately, he just got completely hosed with injuries. Was a Ravens draft pick a handful of years ago. Zach Moss, interesting, another player from out west, a little bit of a compiler in college. Not sure that that's necessarily a negative, but it's not necessarily a positive either. Royce Freeman, also a similar player in terms of a big back and do a little bit of everything. got passed up despite a limited shot that he got in Denver. Jonathan Franklin, Amir Abdullah, Kareem Hunt, Javon Ringer, James Conner, and Alexander Mattis. So I think, if you take out Hunt, who would obviously be, the clear winner of this group, and he has wiggle that Algiere just does not have. There's no similarities between those players other than their draftable and production, but they're just not similar at all. But I think when you see names like James Conner, like Alexander Madison, and then like Zach Moss and Royce Freeman, those are the four guys that I look here when I see what his box score looks like. You look at the size, you look at what he's probably going to run and where he's being projected in the NFL draft. Those are the four that I think make a lot of sense in terms of about an Algiere low end outcome might look like Royce Freeman, a high end outcome might look like James Conner, and you got to like that in the late second round. So I'm going to probably be overdrafting him because the wide receivers that we see going in the middle of the second round, or maybe in a 1 QB context, drafting that first QB, I'd rather take Algiere and then take my chances on some of those smaller school wide receivers like Sky Moore, who we the other you can pick them up in round 3. We can pick them up in round 3 after getting Algiere in round 2, Dave.
Yeah, so just one comment I want to make too as we're looking through that list of players, because I think for a guy that we're talking about in this context, there's some really intriguing names there. Now, Royce Freeman didn't really work out, but he was a very strong prospect coming out of school, a player that I really liked. And I think that if you have that type of profile that Royce Freeman did, getting drafted 10 times, a decent percentage of those types of players are going to work out. Yeah. So I think just having names like that, James Conner, like you said, for a player that's probably going to be draftable at the point in rookie drafts that we would expect, it's definitely worth a name taking down. And what I was going to say, you took the words out of my mouth. It gives you an opportunity knowing that he's there to maybe go for some other positions to fill in, knowing that you have guys like this you can take some chances with later on.
Yeah, 100%. The other thing that I would say is if you draft Algiere, he's a hold for 2 years no matter what. When we saw Connor come into the league, he was just absolutely buried behind Lev Bell. But then when he got his chance, he made the most of it. That is exactly what I think will happen with Algiere. And the other guys that we talked about, Madison has gotten his chance. He hasn't been able to usurp Dalvin Cook, but he's looked every bit the part of a fantasy compiler when he gets a chance. He's a good enough back to produce. And Moss and Freeman got their chances too. Algiere's going to get his chance. So hold on to him. Even if he doesn't give it to you in year 1, he's going to give it to you. Now, before we go, Dave, we've got some chatter in the commentary today. Jose Pena, I gave him my comment. Let's go here. Jose Pena says, curious to know if there will be more best ball content in 2022. Helped win a few leagues in best ball 10s. Jose, we will be crushing best ball more than ever in 2022. Oh my goodness, the chat's going crazy right now.
Yes.
we won't share all of those. But Sean does his best ball workshop every year. He and Blair are doing a series where they draft some FFPC kind of not way too early the best ball tournament teams. I'm already almost 30 drafts deep now on Underdog, and we're going to be doing a lot of Underdog content this year as well. So Jose, you did the best ball 10s last year. If you're going to play $10 best ball, I would say the Underdog $10 tournament that's going on right now, because you can still win money for winning your league, but there's actually a chance at a jackpot beyond that. Now you're playing, against, a larger pool of players, but consider that. So I would like to steer you there as well. And then, Dave and I are going to be talking best ball targets all off season long. And the last thing that I'll say is we're going to have the opportunity to pick the brains of the best and brightest in the industry. A month and a half is nuts. So next week, we've got Scott Barrett coming on the show. The week after, it's Ryan McDowell. Then we get Danny Kelly of The Ringer, who does such a great job with his draft guide as well, was an absolute dynamite guest for us last summer. We talked to the LA Rams and Cooper Kupp and Daryl Henderson when he was on. We're going to follow that up with my guy, Ray Garvin of FTN Network's going to come on and tell us what he sees in these prospects, whereas we're looking more at the production, the statistics, and the measurable. Watching these players, let's put that up a bit, see what we come up with, and we're going to round it off with the Podfather in mid-March. So this is going to be a really fun tour de force that we're bringing on. Looks like we got one more question. I will give you the opportunity to answer this one. I already own DJ, Rondale, and Elijah, says Joe Massa. How much should I overpay to land Sky?
We'll see if Curtis, since I know he likes Sky, feels differently. I don't think that he's the type of player that you overpay for. Personally, for me, a lot of what makes him intriguing is that you could get him at a price that seems fair, what one might even consider a discount. So I probably wouldn't overpay with that group of receivers that you have. He does not have the profile that supports doing so.
Yeah, so I think what I said the other day on the pod was I'd like to trade up to the early third to get him instead of other players in the third. And I do this every single year. I end up on the clock. There's one or two of these guys that's still available. I trade into the very late second or early third to get them. So I need the bit equity. What I would say here is, if he's on the board 301, 302, etc., Joe, and let's say you're sitting at there at 306, 308, or later, toss in your fourth or just try to move up to the early third. And you could say that really for any prospect that you're looking at in that area. I would certainly be doing that for Sky if I was drafting this week.
So that also might have to do the DJ more, Rondale more, Elijah more, Sky more, a little bit slow. Just got that. That's hilarious.
Yeah, we give a very serious answer, but you can never have too many cooks. And I guess you can never have too many mores.
All right. Hey, Curtis, what day of the week is it? Well, what day of the week is it when everybody's listening?
It's Thursday night on the live stream. It's Friday morning. It is Friday morning for those of you listening to the podcast. We're just going to go classic with our stay positive, work hard, and make it happen.
Thank you for listening to the RotoViz Fantasy Football Show. Send us questions at rvffshow@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter at Dave Caban FF and at CPatrickNFL. Leave us a voicemail at 978-615-9214 and make sure to rate, review, and subscribe.